Millionaire catches Maid breastfeeding his daughter, and what he does next will leave you shocked. Before we begin, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you love stories filled with love, emotion, twists, and heartwarming endings, subscribe to the channel. It really helps me keep bringing you stories that touch the soul and make a difference. The Wall Clock. Read 4:48 a.m. when Lauren Hayes finished placing Ivy in the handmade sling wrapped in 2 thin blankets. The apartment where they lived in, the western suburbs of Chicago, had only 1 room and a bathroom, with peeling walls and a cracked window that let the late autumn wind in uninvited. It was still dark outside, and the noise of the broken heater competed with the rumble of the elevated train passing 2 blocks away. At 27, Lauren had already learned to live with little sleep, little food, little time for herself. She always woke up before the sun to work the toughest shifts at the cleaning company that serviced the luxurious condo known as the Glass Towers, one of Chicago's most sought-after addresses. With her daughter strapped to her chest, her reddish-brown hair tied in a makeshift bun, and her navy blue uniform covered by a second-hand thrift store coat, Lauren stepped out into the freezing streets. The 512 bus was packed with workers, all silent, carrying bags, lunchboxes, and weary gazes. She got off 2 blocks before the building's main entrance to avoid questions, comments, or the looks from those who didn't understand why someone would bring a baby to work. Entering through the service entrance in the basement, she was met by heavy metal doors and hallways that smelled of disinfectant. She greeted the night shift security guard with a shy nod, the same one who always pretended not to see Ivy, and walked to the back of the supply room where, over the past few months, she had created a small space for her daughter. Inside an empty broom closet, Lauren had placed a sturdy cardboard box covered with a hand-embroidered blanket made by her late grandmother. Above the box hung a small battery-powered lantern with a soft light. Nearby, a thermos with warm water, diapers, a pacifier, and a faded cloth teddy bear. That was where Ivy spent most of her day while her mother cleaned ballrooms with crystal chandeliers and bathrooms bigger than their entire apartment. Lauren gently removed Ivy from the sling, laid the baby in the improvised nest, and knelt beside her. Her 8-month-old daughter looked up with dark, curious eyes, but didn't cry. She simply reached out her tiny hand. Lauren held it and whispered, "You're so strong, my love. Just a few more hours, okay?" She kissed her daughter's forehead, adjusted the blanket, and closed the closet door softly, leaving it slightly open for airflow. Then she washed her hands in the staff bathroom and clipped her badge to her chest. She took the service elevator to the 18th floor. The Glass Tower's hallways gleamed like storefront displays. The floor was light marble, and the glass walls revealed the still sleeping city under the morning mist. The silence there was different, not the silence of scarcity, but of power. Lauren no longer marveled. She had learned too early that, where there's too much shine, there's rarely room for those carrying the weight of the world on their backs. She walked quietly, pushing her cleaning cart, until a resident stepped out of one of the apartments wearing a white satin robe and slippers that looked like they had never touched a dirty floor. "Cleaning lady," the woman said, pointing to the hallway. "There are marks on the entrance glass. Could you clean that before the guests arrive?" Lauren simply nodded. The good morning stuck in her throat stayed there. She returned to the elevator and headed to the lobby, where the entrance hall, made of black granite and mirrored glass, reflected her distorted, tired image. She knelt to clean a footprint. Cold water from the sponge trickled down her fingers. With every scrub, she thought about how many doors she had knocked on for work, how many shelters she had slept in with Ivy in her arms, how many times she had heard the word no even, while carrying the world on her shoulders, but she didn't complain. Never. She was an efficient shadow, An invisible woman. While the city sipped coffee from thermal cups and rushed to meetings, Lauren remained there, tending to the corners, the details. The traces no one noticed. At 8:30, between one floor and another, she quietly went down to the supply room. She slowly opened the closet door. Ivy was still asleep, snuggled in, her tiny chest rising and falling gently. Lauren knelt once more, rested her forehead against the side of the box, and whispered, "You're going to have a different future, Ivy. I'll find a way. Even if the whole world tells me I can't." She knew she wasn't special. She knew no one expected her to change the world. But that morning, like so many others, she forced herself to believe that somehow, even invisible, even ignored, her existence had value. She had no idea that in that very building, a man used to having absolute control over the world was about to see her for the first time, and neither of their lives would ever be the same again. The crying started faint, muffled, like a restrained sob behind the locked door of the broom closet. But within minutes, it turned into a desperate cry. That echoed through the basement pipes. Lauren heard it from the 16th floor, and her whole body tensed. It was Ivy, and she knew that kind of cry couldn't be ignored. She rushed down the service stairs, mop still in hand, heart pounding. When she reached the basement, she opened the closet door with trembling hands. The baby was flushed, eyes watery, little hands waving as if searching for something that wasn't there. "Mommy's here," Lauren whispered, lifting her daughter into her arms. The smell of baby sweat mixed with body heat tore at her inside. Ivy was starving. She looked around, desperate. She couldn't go down to the staff locker room. There were cameras. And she couldn't leave the building with the baby in her arms. She was in the middle of an extra shift, covering for a coworker. Her eyes landed on the service elevator panel. The 21st floor, where the presidential penthouse was located, showed up as unoccupied at that hour. Nathan Caldwell never came in on Monday mornings. The staff tracking system listed the unit as under maintenance. Just a few minutes. Lauren murmured to herself as she pressed the button, eyes fixed on the cameras, none pointed directly at her. The elevator rose in silence, and the contrast was stark. The luxury floors felt like another planet. Stepping into the private hall of the top floor, Lauren was swallowed by the silence and the gleaming white marble floor shining like glass. The decor was minimalist, too expensive to touch. She crossed the lounge quickly, barely breathing. She found the side powder room, a door without a lock, but with a wide mirror and soft indirect lighting. The air smelled of lavender, mixed with the cold sensation of stone beneath her feet. She knelt in the corner, sitting on the floor with her back against the wall. She took off the oversized coat and unfastened her bra with steady hands as Ivy whimpered with her tiny mouth open. "It's okay, my flower. It's going to be okay." As soon as she latched onto her mother's breast, Ivy stopped. Her breathing slowed. Her body relaxed, and her still damp eyes gently closed, as if that small moment was enough to feel the world a little safer. Lauren didn't cry, but inside she crumbled. It was there, on the marble floor of a luxury bathroom, feeding her daughter in secret, that she felt the sheer size of the gap between worlds. And yet, in that moment, she was only a mother. Not a cleaning lady, not a survivor. Just a mother. She was so focused on her daughter, so immersed in the relief of seeing her fed, that she didn't hear the front door open. On the other side of the frosted glass of the powder room, Nathan Caldwell stopped in the middle of the hallway. He wore a dark wool overcoat over a crisp white shirt. He had arrived hours earlier than expected, quiet as always. In his hand, a leather folder with contracts he planned to review alone. He was going to walk past until he heard the faint whisper and the rhythmic suckling coming from the powder room. He narrowed his eyes, curious. walked up to the partially open door and gently pushed it with his fingertips. And then he saw her. The young cleaning lady sitting on the floor, pale, reddish-brown hair tied up carelessly, eyes fixed on her sleeping daughter at her breast. There was no impropriety, no neglect. It was a raw scene, intimate, strangely pure. For a moment, Nathan froze. She didn't see him. He stood still, breath held. His gaze hardened in doubt, but his heart, without him admitting it, beat differently. She was trespassing on his property. But that wasn't what he saw. For the first time in years, he saw someone in that place. With that much truth in their eyes, Nathan stood at the doorway, motionless. The penthouse hallway, usually as impersonal as a marble showroom, was now filled with an image he hadn't expected and couldn't look away from. The woman sat on the cold bathroom floor, her back to him, legs folded, body slightly curled as if shielding something sacred. Her reddish-brown hair had slipped from a loose bun, framing her pale neck. In her lap, a small baby nursed in silence, one tiny hand resting on her exposed breast. Nathan didn't know her name. He vaguely remembered seeing her pass through the lobby a few days earlier, always in a rush, eyes avoiding contact. Just another employee. One more among countless invisible faces. But here, in this moment, she wasn't invisible. She was real. His watch read 7:13, but time seemed suspended. Nathan felt like he'd intruded on a moment that wasn't his, and for a second, he nearly backed away. But there was something about the scene, about this woman kneeling with a child in her arms that held him in place. She brought the baby to work? He whispered to himself, eyebrows furrowed, more perplexed than outraged. Lauren, still unaware of his presence, gently stroked her daughter's fine hair in soft, automatic motions. Every line of her body showed exhaustion, but there was also something Nathan hadn't seen in a long time: tenderness. The last time he'd seen something like it was before Grace died. A lump rose in his throat. He gripped the leather folder in his hand until his knuckles turned white. His gray-green eyes, trained for contracts, figures, and risk assessments, couldn't look away from what he was witnessing. The woman took a deep breath, maybe sensing a shift in the air, and then slowly turned her head. Her eyes met his. For a second, neither of them spoke. Lauren froze. The color drained from her face. Panic filled her gaze. She instinctively pulled Ivy tighter against her chest, trying to get up quickly, knees sliding on the cold marble. "I'm sorry, sir, I thought it was empty. She stammered, voice shaking, fumbling to cover her breast with her coat, shielding her child, her dignity, and her job all at once. Nathan raised his hand slowly, as if asking for silence. His expression was unreadable. "Don't move," he said at last, in a low, almost hoarse voice. Lauren stopped, startled. "I'm not calling anyone. Just stay where you are." His eyes scanned the floor, the baby, the woman before him, as if trying to solve an equation that didn't make sense in his world. She didn't look like an intruder. She looked like a survivor, a woman doing what she could to feed her child. "You work here, don't you?" he asked, still standing at the door. She nodded, not daring to speak. "And you have no one to leave your daughter with?" Lauren pressed her lips together. Her eyes welled up with tears, but she held them back. "No one," she finally replied. "Just her." Silence settled again. Nathan stepped back. He leaned against the doorframe as if the weight of those two words, "just her," had moved something inside him. He didn't know what to do. He who ran empires with a single gesture was now frozen, vulnerable, in front of the simplest, most disarming image he had ever seen. "Cover yourself and finish what you started," he said at last. Not a threat, but not exactly gentle either. "There's no need to rush." She looked at him, wary. She didn't know if it was a truce, or the beginning of the end. Nathan turned slowly and walked out of the hallway. His footsteps faded. Lauren stayed there, in silence, Ivy still nestled against her. Her heart beat so loud it echoed through the cold walls of the luxury bathroom. But for the first time in a long while, she felt something new. He hadn't yelled. He hadn't thrown her out. He hadn't told her to leave. She didn't yet know what that meant. But something had changed, and she wasn't ready. That night, Lauren barely slept. Ivy rested peacefully beside her, unaware of the storm raging in her mother's chest. The silence of their tiny South Side apartment was broken only by the distant sound of trains and the ticking of the wall clock. Lauren kept replaying every gesture, every look from Nathan Caldwell. He hadn't yelled, hadn't called security, hadn't even accused her, but also he hadn't said anything else. He just walked away. And for Lauren, that was enough not to get her hopes up. At exactly 6 a.m., she arrived at the building through the service entrance as usual. She wore the same thick gray wool coat and the navy blue uniform hastily ironed with the communal hallway iron. Ivy was wrapped in a blanket inside the sling, still sleeping. The child was already used to dark commutes, the smell of cleaning products, and the tight warmth of her mother's chest. But that day, something was different. As she passed the basement security desk, the guard avoided her gaze. He simply nodded toward the administration office without saying a word. Lauren's chest tightened. She stepped in carefully. The room was cold, furnished with modern, impersonal decor. Behind a glass desk, the building's administrative manager, a blonde woman in her 50s with a beige blazer and a hard expression, sat waiting, an open folder in front of her. Beside her, a supervisor from the cleaning contractor flipped through some papers, avoiding eye contact. Lauren barely had time to introduce herself. "You know why you were called in, Miss Hayes?" the manager asked without looking up from her screen. "No, ma'am," Lauren answered, her voice low but steady. "If this is about yesterday's shift, I finished all my tasks." The woman cut her off with a sharp gesture. "We received an anonymous report. They said you used the presidential penthouse's powder room for personal reasons, and that you entered a private area with a child unauthorized." Lauren felt the ground vanish beneath her feet. "I just I thought the floor was empty. The baby was crying and, Miss Hayes, that is a direct violation of conduct policy. We have partial footage, even if it doesn't clearly show the act. Just bringing a baby into that floor is grounds for immediate termination." The supervisor cleared his throat uncomfortably. Lauren looked at him. He turned his face away. "I didn't hurt anyone. I didn't take anything. I just fed my daughter," Lauren said, her voice beginning to crack. "I didn't have another option." "I'm sorry," the manager replied coldly. "Your contract is terminated as of today. You'll be paid for yesterday's shift and one additional week per company policy." Lauren stood frozen, her eyes wide, trembling with disbelief. "And Mr. Caldwell? Does he know about this?" "We're not authorized to involve residents or property owners in this type of decision." The complaint came from building management. And at that moment, she understood. He hadn't come. He hadn't stepped in. Maybe he had turned his back like everyone else. She left the room holding Ivy in her arms, her legs weak and her heart crushed. She didn't cry there, not in front of them. But as she walked through the service corridor and pressed the elevator button, her hands shook. The same elevator where she had wiped mirrors with vinegar and microfiber cloth now reflected the face of a broken woman. No paycheck, no plan, no safety net left. On the way home, Lauren looked down at Ivy sleeping on her chest and whispered, "I promised you'd have a better life. But maybe the world's just not ready for you." Snow had begun to fall softly over Chicago's rooftops. Winter was arriving. And Lauren, once again, was walking alone, carrying her daughter in her arms and a suffocating question in her chest. Why doesn't anyone see the value in a mother just trying to survive? She didn't know it yet, but someone had seen her, and that someone hadn't forgotten what he'd witnessed. 3 days had passed since the dismissal. Lauren spent her days searching for odd cleaning jobs through gig apps and the cold evenings, blended into long nights inside an apartment where the heater barely worked. Ivy slept in 3 layers of clothing and her great-grandmother's old blanket, while Lauren tried to stretch the little that was left in the fridge. That Thursday morning, she walked down the emergency stairs with Ivy strapped to her chest. The building's elevator was broken again. The damp concrete steps smelled of mildew and stale coffee. She stopped on the 2nd floor where the small mailbox shared with other residents was located. She lifted the metal flap and found, among crumpled flyers and an overdue electric bill, a white envelope with her name written by hand. Lauren Hayes. The handwriting was firm, elegant, written in dark ink that looked carefully chosen. She frowned, didn't recognize the sender. She opened it right there, leaning against the cold wall. Inside was a single note and a small bank receipt. The note, printed on thick, folded paper, read, "Lauren, I was informed too late about your dismissal. I did not authorize it, nor do I agree with how it was handled. What I witnessed that day was not a violation. It was a silent cry for help. I regret not acting sooner. I've sent a sum to help cover your immediate needs. Please accept it as restitution, not charity. If possible, I would like to speak with you. Respectfully, formally, and without expectations." Nathan Caldwell. Lauren felt her breath catch. She looked again at the envelope, then at the receipt. A bank transfer of $2,000, enough to cover overdue rent, buy diapers, food, and maybe keep the lights on for another month. But along with the relief came hesitation. She sat on the bottom step of the staircase. Ivy, still sleeping, let out a tiny sigh. Lauren gently caressed her daughter's head, but her eyes stayed locked on the note as if it were burning in her hands. "Is this real?" she murmured to herself, "or just another man trying to ease his guilt?" She'd seen gestures like this before. When she got pregnant with Ivy, the child's father, a nurse with whom she'd had a short-lived relationship, promised support, shelter, a future. The moment she told him she was pregnant, he vanished, leaving behind promises, and silence since. Then, Lauren had learned to distrust any kindness that came too easily, and now here it was, a handwritten letter, signed by a powerful man claiming he wanted to talk without expectations. But life had taught Lauren that when wealthy men said they expected nothing, that's exactly when you should expect everything. She folded the letter carefully and tucked it into her coat pocket. Then she looked up through the stairwells. Glass window at the cloudy sky and sighed deeply. "I don't know if I can trust you, Nathan Caldwell, but my daughter needs food, and I need answers." She stood up slowly, the weight of Ivy in her arms, the weight of doubt on her shoulders. That night, sitting on the torn couch in the living room, Lauren read the letter for the 5th time. The transfer had cleared. The gesture seemed sincere, but something inside her still screamed, what if it's just another power play? She didn't know, but something about this note felt different, more restrained, more human. And that was what scared her the most. 2 days later, Lauren finally replied to the letter. Not by phone, not by text. She simply left a handwritten note, slipping it discreetly under the administration office door, knowing it would reach him. "I'll be at the cafe in the lobby tomorrow at 10 a.m. I'll only talk, Lauren." The next morning, she wore the least worn-out coat she owned, pinned her hair back with a metal clip, and left Ivy in the care of her neighbor for an hour. The cafe was located in the lobby of the very condo where she'd been fired, a glass-walled, Modern space with light wooden tables and soft background music. The same place where so many times she had cleaned the floors unnoticed. This time, she walked in as a customer. Nathan Caldwell was already there, seated near the window with a cup of coffee beside him and a closed tablet in front. He wore a dark blue shirt with no tie and a tailored wool blazer, but there was something different about his expression, less rigid, almost uncertain. Lauren approached slowly, heart racing. He stood up. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice lower than she remembered. "No need to thank me. You said you wanted to talk. I'm listening." She didn't sit. She just crossed her arms, keeping a guarded distance. Nathan nodded and gestured toward the chair across from him. After a moment, she gave in and sat down, her eyes locked onto his. "I know you have no reason to trust me," he began, "but I want to be honest. Seeing you that day with your daughter reminded me of someone I lost." Lauren held his gaze, though her chest tightened. She didn't reply. "My wife Grace was a volunteer nurse, worked in shelters and community clinics. She was brilliant, strong, had a gift for seeing people everyone else ignored. When she died 2 years ago, I closed every door, including the emotional ones." He paused, took a sip of his now cold coffee. "But that morning in the powder room, it was like something inside me cracked. Not out of pity, but memory. The feeling that maybe I'd become someone she wouldn't even recognize." Lauren drew a deep breath. Her throat tightened, but she fought to keep control. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because I don't want you to think I'm helping out of guilt or charity. What you did was take care of your daughter like any mother would, and that's not weakness. That's courage." Then Nathan pulled an envelope from his jacket and placed it on the table. "I want to offer you a different position, official, on the books. A fair salary, flexible hours, and assistance with private childcare for Ivy." Lauren frowned, hesitating. "A position doing what?" "Assistant in organization and personal support. In my penthouse. You'd handle household management, supplies, logistics, but with autonomy, not as a servant. As someone I trust to keep my home running." "In your penthouse," she repeated, arms crossing again. "The place where I was fired for feeding my child?" "I know," he said quickly. "It was a mistake, and I was complicit by staying silent. But I'm trying to make it right, truly." Lauren looked down at the envelope. She didn't open it. "And why should I believe this isn't just another rich man's whim? You fix things with a bank transfer and expect people to forget what they've been through?" Nathan took a tense breath but didn't push back. "You don't have to believe me, but I can prove it with actions. If you accept, it'll be on your terms. A clear contract, no hidden favors, no personal obligations, just a fresh start." She stood up, still not touching the envelope. "I need time, of course." As she turned to leave, Nathan said something that made her pause for just a second. "She would have liked you." Lauren didn't answer, but inside, something ached. Not from the comparison, but from the strange sincerity in his voice. She went home with her heart torn between mistrust and the possibility that, for the first time, she might actually have a real chance to change her daughter's future. One question remained. Was that man truly ready to change his own? Lauren hesitated for over a week before accepting the new job, but necessity spoke louder than pride. Ivy had caught a cold, the power bill was past due, and a few app-based cleaning gigs no longer covered even her daughter's formula. On the morning she officially started as an organization assistant, she entered Nathan's penthouse through the service entrance as he had requested, to avoid awkwardness with other residents. The place was silent, orderly, and weighed down by a kind of emptiness that was hard to name. Everything was beautiful, yes, but impersonal. As if no one truly lived there, Nathan kept his word. He showed her the space, gave her access keys, opened cabinets, and made it clear, with no ambiguity, that she would have set hours, autonomy in her role, and access to the buildings. Private daycare for Ivy. In the first few days, Lauren kept her distance. She was polite, efficient, but avoided personal conversation. Nathan respected that boundary. She moved through the space like someone drawing lines, everything clean, functional, but with her heart sealed shut. Until one late afternoon, while she was organizing the hallway cabinets, Lauren heard footsteps and muffled laughter. She turned and came face to face with a tall blonde woman with piercing blue eyes and a tight beige dress. She wore high heels even inside the penthouse and carried an expensive leather handbag slung over her arm. "You must be the new maid," the woman said, looking Lauren up and down with a tight, artificial smile. "Organization assistant," Lauren replied firmly, not looking too far up. "Oh, of course," the woman laughed with barely concealed contempt. "I'm Meredith. I was married to Nathan's brother. It's been a while, but I'm very close to the family." She walked around the room like she owned the place, touching objects that clearly weren't hers. She paused in front of an empty picture frame on the mantel and murmured, "This place used to be dead. But apparently there's been some interesting resurrections." Lauren didn't answer. She just kept working, though a chill ran down her spine. Meredith watched her for a few more seconds before saying goodbye with a tight-lipped smile. "It was a pleasure, Lauren." 2 days later, everything collapsed. Lauren was at the daycare, signing Ivy out when her phone began to vibrate nonstop. Messages, unknown calls, social media notifications. When she finally opened one, the floor fell away beneath her. A photo of her breastfeeding Ivy, clearly taken through the crack in the powder room door, was now viral. A gossip blog headline read, "Maid or manipulator? Woman caught breastfeeding. Baby in reclusive billionaire's penthouse." Sources suggest emotional blackmail in exchange for personal benefits. Alongside the image were grotesque edits, zoom-ins of her face with cruel captions, jokes about the new way to climb the social ladder, and memes comparing Ivy to the heiress of luxury breast milk. Lauren froze, her hands shaking. Messages flooded in. Vile comments, insults, slurs, even veiled threats. Within an hour, her name was trending on local Twitter. By the time Nathan found out, it was too late. Lauren locked herself inside the tiny apartment, crying in silence with Ivy in her arms as the baby tugged at her blouse, hungry. But Lauren couldn't bring herself to nurse her. The trauma was stronger than the instinct. Nathan called, texted, came to her door. She didn't open it. In the middle of the night, she deleted all her social media, changed her phone number, packed a backpack, wrapped Ivy in 3 blankets, and left before sunrise. The public humiliation had been like a wildfire. And once again, Lauren was fleeing the ashes. Lauren left the apartment at 5 in the morning. The gray silence of early dawn still hung over Chicago, and the city had barely begun to stir. The backpack on her shoulders was packed with baby clothes, diapers, a thermos of warm tea, and a few important documents. Ivy, just over a year old, slept wrapped in a wool blanket, her tiny fingers curled into fists. Shame clung to Lauren like a fine dust, invisible at first glance, but always there. She couldn't walk the streets without feeling watched. Even if no one said a word, even if the online storm had died down, she saw judging faces on every corner. And the worst part wasn't what they said about her. It was what they said about Ivy. She grew up with that on the internet. She'd always be the daughter of the woman who tried to climb with her chest, the baby used as a stepping stone. Lauren couldn't bear it. She closed the apartment door without looking back. left the key in the building manager's mailbox, and powered off her phone before stepping outside. At the central station, she bought a new SIM card with cash at an anonymous shop. Then she boarded a train to Humboldt Park, where an acquaintance of an old cleaning coworker offered her a room in the back of a small house, something she could pay for weekly. It was tiny, damp, with no heater, but it was safe. In the following days, Lauren became a house cleaner again. She woke up at 4:30 a.m., strapped Ivy into a makeshift seat rigged onto an abandoned shopping cart she found on a corner, and crossed neighborhoods with cleaning supplies tied to the cart's handle with duct tape. She didn't talk to anyone except her clients. Avoided questions, small talk, or lingering glances. Her face carried a deep exhaustion and a silence that discouraged anyone from getting too close. Nathan tried to find her. He called hospitals, rang her old number dozens of times, contacted the daycare, all without luck. Even Meredith feigned innocence when he confronted her. Me? Publish those photos? Nathan, please. I'm family. I was only looking out for your reputation. Must have been a nosy staffer who leaked it, but he knew. And what haunted him most wasn't her betrayal. It was that he had let something so cruel unfold in front of him, and hadn't stopped it in time. Lauren, meanwhile, was on autopilot. She cleaned with precision, without pause, without mistakes. She carried Ivy from house to house, sometimes leaving her daughter on service stairwells while scrubbing strangers' bathrooms. Whenever someone asked if she needed help, she'd say, "We're used to it. It's just a phase." But it wasn't just a phase. It was escape. A silent vow she promised herself while scrubbing the floor of a bathroom in Lincoln Square. Ivy sitting on a folded rug nearby, that she would never set foot in the world of the wealthy again. They look at us like we're disposable, like our kids are props. I won't let my daughter grow up thinking her worth depends on where we live or who decides to help. And in that moment, as she quietly polished the mirror of yet another pristine, soulless penthouse, Lauren was certain she'd never see Nathan Caldwell again. But fate still had chapters she hadn't seen coming. Spring was slowly arriving in Chicago, but Nathan Caldwell's soul was still deep in winter. Months had passed since Lauren vanished. Despite all his efforts, he couldn't find her. He hired a private investigator, visited daycares, retraced her steps, reread the notes she'd left so many times that he had memorized the curves of every letter. Nothing, no sign. But she never left his thoughts. The image of her sitting on the cold bathroom floor still haunted him, not out of guilt but shame. He had failed the one person who had asked for nothing, who just wanted to feed her daughter in peace. And that's why, on that morning, when Nathan took the stage at the annual Tech and Equity Conference, broadcast live to over 80,000 viewers, he left behind the speech prepared by his communications team. The official theme was technology and social responsibility in the 21st century. But Nathan had something else in mind. He wore a custom charcoal suit, black tie, and polished leather shoes. His dark brown hair was slightly tousled, as if he hadn't slept, which was true. Backstage, organizers expected a sober, technical, numbers-driven address. But Nathan stepped up to the podium with his hands empty and his gaze steady. No tablet, no notes. He stood there in silence for a long moment before speaking. Today I was supposed to present charts, numbers, growth forecasts. But some things can't be measured in spreadsheets. The front row, CEOs and politicians exchanged discreet glances. A few months ago, I witnessed something that changed my life. And no, it wasn't a tech breakthrough or a multi-million-dollar merger. He paused, his voice steady but with a rasp that revealed the weight behind his words. I saw a woman sitting on the cold floor of a bathroom, my bathroom, breastfeeding her daughter in silence. She wasn't begging, she wasn't demanding anything. She just needed to feed the person she loved most, and still, she was judged, exposed, humiliated. The room fell silent. Even the phones lowered. That woman's name is Lauren Hayes. Maybe some of you know her. Not by name, but from the twisted headlines circulating in recent months. That photo, that scandal, that so-called emotional manipulation. Nathan inhaled deeply. His eyes glistened, but he didn't flinch. Let me say this clearly. That image, the one so many people shared to mock, accuse, or feel morally superior, was the purest portrait of dignity I've ever seen. She wasn't intrusive. She wasn't opportunistic. She was a mother. In a world that offers neither space nor silence for mothers like her. Journalists in the back started typing furiously. Flashes popped. But Nathan continued, unfazed. While I dined at tables set with silver, she crossed neighborhoods with her child in her arms, cleaning homes just to afford one more meal. While we talked about startups and investment rounds, she shielded her baby from cameras that called her a manipulator. And while so many talk about social impact, she was the impact in the shadows where no one was looking. The crowd now listened with reverent silence. That's why. Today, as CEO of Caldwell Holdings, I'm launching the Root Project, a permanent initiative to support single mothers in crisis. There will be housing, scholarships for technical courses, and free childcare in Chicago's most forgotten neighborhoods. We begin with 10 centers this year, and the initial investment fund will be $5 million, my own money, not from the company. Murmurs, surprise, a few audible gasps. Nathan lifted his hand slightly and concluded, calmly, some people ask for nothing, but deserve everything. And if it took me too long to understand that ... it's because I was raised in a world that taught me to look only upward. But dignity, ladies and gentlemen ... lives on the ground. The silence that followed was dense. Then a lone man clapped, then another, and another ... until the entire auditorium rose in ovation. The sound of applause echoed like a wave against the walls, but Nathan didn't smile. He simply stepped down from the stage with tearful eyes and the quiet certainty that even if Lauren never heard it, he had finally said what needed to be said. And at that very moment, in a laundromat on the west side of the city, a woman, with her hair pinned in a bun and a baby in her lap, watched the live broadcast on a small wall-mounted TV, and something inside her stirred. Spring was finally beginning to show in Chicago, but it was in Lauren's life where the real season of renewal had begun. The morning after Nathan's speech, she was at the Humboldt Park Community Clinic, where she volunteered on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Since enrolling in a small evening nursing course, her days had found new rhythm, new purpose. She cared for the elderly with tenderness, cleaned open wounds with steady hands, and listened to repeated stories with quiet patience. It was the closest she'd ever been to a dream, a simple dream, but hers. That morning, Ivy was in the makeshift playroom near the triage corridor, giggling as she stacked colorful blocks, her dark eyes shining with innocence. Lauren wore a white coat with her name hand-stitched on the pocket and clean but worn sneakers. Her reddish-brown hair was tied back in a firm bun, and though her eyes still bore signs of sleepless nights, they held a calm brightness she hadn't felt in a long time. As she changed the bandages on a diabetic woman's feet, she heard hurried footsteps and hushed whispers in the hallway. The nurses were murmuring, unusual for a clinic so used to anonymity. "There's a man in reception ... tall, in a suit. Looks like he's in the wrong place," said one of them. Lauren didn't think much of it. She continued her work, adjusting the gauze and gently applying ointment. But when she stepped into the hallway to restock supplies, she froze. Nathan Caldwell was there, standing, shoulders tight, eyes restless. In his hands, a simple bouquet, Not red roses. Not lavish arrangements. Just daisies, lavender, and wild greens tied with string. Flowers that came from people who didn't expect to be noticed. His eyes found hers. Lauren didn't move. Her heart pounded, but she didn't take a step forward. Nathan took a breath and spoke first. I've been looking for you for months. Not as a businessman, not as a man of means, but as a man, as a father, as someone who failed. She crossed her arms, her expression controlled. You shouldn't be here, she said calmly. I know, he replied, honest, but I also know that if I waited for the world's permission to fix what I broke, I'd never move at all. Lauren studied him with steady eyes. For the first time, Nathan looked. Stripped, not of clothes, but of armor. No arrogance. No control. Just vulnerability. I watched your speech, she said, finally. On the laundromat TV, I cried, but not for you. I cried for me, because no one's ever seen me that way. Before, you deserved more, he said, voice cracking. Long before I ever crossed your path, she lowered her gaze, then slowly looked up. You've become a man who speaks well, but what are you going to do with that from now on? Nathan held out the bouquet. I'm going to keep going. For the Laurens out there, for the kids who sleep in broom closets, for the mothers who don't even have time to cry. She looked at the flowers, then looked at Ivy, who was now running toward her, arms open and laughing. Mommy! Nathan stepped back respectfully. But when the little girl stopped at her mother's side, her gaze went straight to him. Who's that, Mommy? Lauren knelt down and ran a hand through Ivy's curls. Someone ... Who's trying to learn how to be better? Nathan swallowed hard. She stood, Ivy in her arms, and came face to face with him. I don't need promises, Nathan, or contracts. I've had enough words in my life that meant nothing. Then what do you need? He asked, almost in a whisper. Lauren, breath deep, choosing each syllable like someone choosing the shape of a second chance. Presence, respect, truth. If you can give me that, you can stay. Nathan didn't speak. He only nodded, eyes glassy, no pressure in his posture, no demands. Just listening. She took one flower from the bouquet and gave it to Ivy, who grabbed it with joy. It's going to be slow, Lauren said softly, but it's going to be real, or it won't be anything at all. And for the first time in a long while, they smiled. Not out of politeness, not as a tactic, just a small, tired ... Honest smile. Sometimes the encounters that change us most don't arrive from above, not in helicopters, not in rehearsed speeches. They bloom from the ground where dignity insists on growing, even between ruins, because some stories don't begin with a yes, but with the courage to stay. And then, what did you think of this story? Leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments and tell me how this journey touched you. If it moved you, don't forget to like, share with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories. And before you go, I've picked another emotional story that's sure to touch your heart even more. Hit play and come feel it with me, because some stories don't just entertain, they heal.